Today we're going to be discussing whether or not it's worth upgrading from the A6400 to the A7 III for video. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Malcolm, and if you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thanks for checking out the new video. Anyways, today we're going to be discussing whether or not it's worth upgrading from the A6400 for video purposes into the A7 III. Now, I've done several tests testing strictly the video features of these cameras and what I think are worthwhile to the upgrade. Now, these are the only things I focused on in this test. Now, this is no way a full comparison between the two models, but I wanted to find out if these two cameras between head-to-head, how they would perform next to each other, and what the benefits of the A7 III are over the A6400 or vice versa. I wanted to find out which camera was really better at doing what. I wanted to find out what the major differences were for the value difference between the two cameras. First thing I want to cover in this video is the major differences between the bodies of these two cameras. They're both drastically different cameras, and what does the A7 III give you versus what the A6400 has to offer. So the first major comparison difference between these two bodies is one's full frame and one's APS-C. The A7 III is a full-frame sensor versus the A6400's APS-C size sensor. What does that mean for the video? On the A7 III, you're going to get a wider perspective with the lens that you have on it if you're running full-frame lenses. Now, the A6400, you can run a full-frame lens on it, no problem, but it's going to give you a crop factor. And we'll discuss more about crop factors later on in this video and show you the differences between the two. The second major difference between these are the batteries. The A7 III uses the new Z battery Sony offers. This is the Z battery right here versus the old Sony W50 battery right here. Now, as you can see, there's quite the size comparison difference between these two batteries. Sony did this was everybody complained originally that the smaller W50 batteries were just not powerful enough. And one of the tests I did was a battery test, and we'll discuss more about that in a minute. But the results from the Z battery are pretty remarkable. The next major feature of the difference between these two bodies is the LCD screen. Now, while the A7 III has a fixed but foldable screen right here, the A6400 offers a full flip screen. Now, while it still stays fixed to the back of the camera and gives you the same range of motion basically and viewability of the A7 III, it has the added feature of being able to flip around to the front. And what this allows you to do is essentially vlog with this camera and be able to see yourself in the image. Okay, point number 4 is image stabilization. The A7 III has in-body image stabilization. That means the sensor inside here actually moves in 5 directions, and it can actually help achieve 5.5 stops of image stabilization. If you're shooting 150, it's shooting 24p video, that image sensor is in there able to move around and take away a lot of the little jarring movements your cans may have on the camera and give you a steadier image overall. Now, the A6400 doesn't offer any kind of image stabilization, and all you have is the lens itself if it has optical steady shot or OSS. There are still quite a few really good lenses out there that do have OSS. Most of the telephoto lenses have some sort of optical steady shot, as well as some of the kit lenses. And the kit lens for the A6400, the 18135, has that OSS, and you'll see it used in some of the testing in this video. Okay, point number 5, the major comparison between these two cameras is autofocus. Now, I'm not going to go into detail with the autofocus, but the autofocus is slightly better on the A7 III compared to the A6400 here. The A6400 has 425 phase detect autofocus points and 425 contrast detect focus points. The A7 III is slightly better, having 693 phase detect autofocus points and the same 425 contrast. Now, I didn't do any autofocus tests between these two as they're both very speedy and very fast. The A6400 is one of the fastest autofocusing cameras on the market. Another major body feature that these cameras are different on is the SD card slot. The A7 III offers dual card slots, whereas the A6400 still uses just one card slot in the battery compartment. Now, for me personally, this hasn't been a problem. I run a 128 gigabyte memory stick in the A6400, and it gives me about 2.5 hours of 4K recording. The dual card slot would be beneficial if you're doing more professional work, where having the dual card slots is a benefit in this A7 III because it gives you the ability to record your video in both cards at once or in tandem to each other. So if one card fills up, it just automatically switches to the other. So it gives you some choices as far as what you'd like to do with it. The last major body difference between these two cameras is going to be the programmable buttons. The A6400 has a total of 2 custom buttons on the body, C1 and C2, with a total of 8 customizable buttons overall, and 9 if you have a focus hold button on your lens right here. The A7III, however, has 4 custom buttons that can be programmed. So you have C1, C2 up top, you have a C3 over here, and then a C4 down over here. The A7III gives you 12 customizable buttons throughout the body, and it gives you a 13th if you have a lens with the focus hold button on the side. The next comparison between these two bodies is the connectivity and the interface you have with the cameras. The A7III here has 5 connection ports, and they're all hidden behind these little plastic doors that pop open. This is the one thing I really didn't like about this camera, is all these little doors, they're just there flopping around. You don't really have anywhere to put them or maintain them. So if you're trying to shoot with this, you've got it, and you say you've got this thing on a rig for video, you've got a microphone input, maybe a headphone out going to your monitoring headphones, and then you've got an HDMI cable maybe coming off of or going to like a external video recorder. The problem I have is these things are just going to kind of like hang here. They're not tucked away or protected. But anyways, looking at these connection points, you've got a microphone jack right here in this first door. You've got the headphone jack on the back door, as well as your HDMI output. Me personally, I would have loved to have seen the HDMI and the microphone on the same door, just because it'd be one less door to open when you're connecting it. You could leave them both, just one door open for most general setups. So having to open up 2 doors for that really kind of sucks. The bottom is your data connections, maybe a high-speed port, and then you've got your multi-interface port that all Sony's cameras have had in the bottom here. Now, as far as the A6400 goes, now mine's in a small rig here. The thing I love about this is you got one door here on the side, and you just flip it open with your finger, and it opens up. And what I love about the door is it's spring-loaded, so it holds itself open. It doesn't wobble around, doesn't make any noise when you shake it. And when it's open with a small rig, it's completely protected by the cage. And I really like that feature of this design. And I wish the A7III had something similar in this design. But this camera is lacking 2 ports that the A7III has. And one of them is the headphone port, and the other one is going to be your USB-C port. This one's just got your USB multi-interface, your HDMI out, the microphone port. Much cleaner setup as far as for a rig build, in my opinion, is this door right here. All right, so getting into the last couple things about the major comparisons between these two cameras, and that's I want to discuss is price between the two. Now, the price used on an A6400 is anywhere from $700 to $800. Now that's not too bad, but new you can pick these things up body only for about $900 right now. The A7III, on the other hand, brand new, is $1,698, and this camera launched at $2,000, so it's twice the price of an A6400. But is it really twice the camera? The used market on an A7III right now is about $1,500 to $1,600. That's always changing with the sales Sony releases. I think currently there's a sale, you can buy a brand new A7III for $1,698, I believe, and that's not a bad price for this camera. But I don't think I'd buy one new at this point, knowing there's newer models coming out. I would look for one of these maybe used. Now, both the cameras are very similar in their function. They both have the exact same menu systems. Both have basically the exact same feature spec for spec, other than what I've already mentioned in the comparison differences between the two bodies. There's really not a lot of difference between the cameras. So depending on which one you want to do, it's really going to come down to your personal preference, in my opinion. But I have some tests here laid out that I'm going to show you the results on, as well as what I think overall between these two cameras, and whether or not it's worth spending a little bit extra money for an A7III compared to the A6400. Let's get into the testing. The first test is going to be the record limit. Now, these are published specs, and I did do the test during a battery test, and that's how long the camera can record for. The A7III can record for 29 minutes and 50 seconds, not quite 30 minutes. the A6400 can record unlimited, basically until it shuts off, runs out of power, or if your memory card runs out. It'll record continuously the entire time, and it won't ever just stop recording. With the A7III, if you have it sitting there on a tripod recording, you've got to make sure you've at least shut off the record or restart the record every 29 minutes, 50 seconds or so, in order to get all the footage from it. Now, if you forget about it, it's going to stop at 29 minutes and it's done. It's just going to sit there and stand by. The next thing is the file size of the recordings. Now, I'm not too concerned about the actual data file size, but how it delivers the file to you. Now, from what I can tell is I couldn't find any setting that I know of, so if I'm wrong on this, please educate me in it. But the A6400 records in one continuous file. So if you have this thing recording for 1 hour, you have a file that is 1 hour long, and you import it, drop it right into your timeline, and you have it there to work with. The A7III, on the other hand, and this is also the same with my A7R, is that it breaks the file up for you. And I can see it being beneficial, but it's kind of annoying to me in my workflow. The A7III breaks the files up into more manageable file sizes, but you have to import several video files for one, say, continuous shoot. So if you recorded for 1 hour, I was getting file sizes that are approximately 10 minutes in segments, and now they stack up perfectly next to each other on the timeline when you import them, but that's essentially an hour-long video with 10-minute segments. You have 6 files you're going to have to import in and line up and verify that they're continuous at the seams, that they don't break up. Now, I have never had that happen on any of my cameras, but it is a bit annoying in my workflow to have to open up multiple files to get the same video clip and then to edit it down from there. I do like the A6400 in that regard, that it gives me one straight file, and the A7III, it breaks it down. If there's a setting for this on the cameras, please put it down in the comments below, because I would love to be able to know about that. Now, I suppose that would also be beneficial on having the files broken up for file corruption. If one file got corrupted, hopefully all you would lose is that one segment and not all of it. That would be one benefit of it as far as I can tell. All right, so this is the big one, the big test is the battery life. How long does the Z battery last over the A6400's W battery? Well, running these cameras side by side, and in that test I ran both these cameras with the 55-1/8 Zeiss lenses on them and manual focus. The A7III blew that test out of the water, in my opinion. This battery had 8% remaining after the A6400 burned through 2 W batteries. I'm sure I'll have a fancy screen graphic for this, but essentially these are my quick notes on the battery test. The Z batteries are phenomenally good. They're twice the size with twice the power. That's one big huge advantage to the A7IIIs. All the new cameras that use the new Z batteries is how long that battery lasts. It's pretty remarkable. Alright, so the first test we're going to cover is the vlogging test between these two cameras. The A7III as a vlog camera is only lacking really the flip screen. If it had that, it'd be almost a perfect vlog camera. But without that, the A6400 has the ledge up on the vlog, other than it's a crop sensor, so you're going to have a crop reduction in that viewable angle. The tests I did basically covered the A6400 with the 18-135 with the optical steady shot lens on it, and then we do a test with the A7III with a prime with no optical steady shot in the lens, and then again with the 18-135 in a crop mode with OSS. So the camera had its in-body stabilization as well as with the lens in that test, and then with the prime we were relying solely on the in-body stabilization. So let's take a look to see how it came out.
This is a handheld vlog test using the A6400 with the 18-135 lens on it. Now this lens has OSS, so it's my only stabilization when I'm vlogging. I'm currently using the Joby 3K tripod to hold the camera and my mic up. So how's it looking? I can do a hand straight off. I mean, I'm just trying to walk around and vlog. You know, you're actually just not worried about the camera too much. So how does that work out? How's it looking? The OSS. All right, let's try the A7III now. All right, so now here's the vlogging test with the A7 III with the 18135 on it. Now the camera's in crop mode for this lens, and we're currently using the Joby 3K handle to hold the camera. Now I can tell it's moving quite a bit depending how I hold the handle. If I'm holding it out toward the end, I get a lot of what looks like shake in the camera, where if I hold it kind of mid-length of the handle, it seems to be a little bit more steady. But that lens is still moving around quite a bit, so it'll be interesting to see how well the stabilization looks and if it can be cleaned up further in post or not. Okay, now we're on the A7 III with the 24G Master. Now this lens does not have any kind of optical steady shot, so it's solely relying on the image stabilization provided in camera. And we're going to compare this handheld vlogging to see how the stabilization works now. Now, with this combination, the lens is a little bit heavier, so it seems like I can keep it a little bit more stable than with the 18135, but that's just a little minute observation there.
Okay, so after reviewing that footage of the vlog test, I would say that the best looking footage was the A7 III with the OSS 18135 lens attached to it, if I was holding the handle correctly. When I held the Joby tripod down, when I was holding the Joby down here at the bottom, getting the most reach out of it, I had this thing a little bit, curled like so. And when I was holding like this, I got a lot of movement out of the camera. If I choked up on the handle and held it right about here, I eliminated a lot of that movement in the vlog footage it looked like, and it was probably the most stable looking. These three tests were very close, and there were some minute differences you're more than welcome to examine as it's played. But the thing I noticed I thought was the best was the OSS lens attached in tandem with the 5-axis image stabilization. I believe that the camera actually shuts a portion of the stabilization in the sensor down when you have an OSS lens. So the lens is doing a certain part of the movement, and the sensor is also doing part of the movement. So the problem with having the sensor by itself is it's got 5 axes to move on. It's one plane, so one movement affects everything else. So it can only move so much without affecting the image or getting some sort of wobble going on. And it looks like I could see that when I was testing with the 24mm prime on there, because I got a lot more side wobble in the image versus it looked like my face was centered and steady, but I got a lot more little bit of wobble in the back image. And with the OSS lens attached, it looked like the overall image was better if I was holding the handle up a little bit and a little bit tighter. So that did seem like an improvement. The A6400 with just the lens, on the other hand, it looked really good. I didn't see many problems with it, but you are only getting the optical stabilization from the lens and not the addition of the body. So again, I think the best solution was the in-body stabilization in tandem with an OSS lens. So another test I did was the rolling shutter test. Now we're gonna go ahead and play the rolling shutter test here. All right, so checking on the rolling shutter, the first clip is the A6400. When we hit play here, you can see that ladder is bending over quite a bit in that rolling shutter. It's quite significant. And when we go to the A7 III, it seems like it holds a lot better. There's a slight bend to it, but it still is holding it very straight. You get a little bit of it, but not like the A6400. So when you compare both of them side by side, you can see there's a huge difference. The A6400 has a massive amount of rolling shutter, where the A7 III holds much steadier. For the low light comparison test, what I did was I took both cameras out on the tripod, did it one at a time. I tested the A7 III, ran through various ISO ranges, adjusting only the ISO through the range, and then at the end of the test, tested them at 32,000 ISO and brought the exposure down into the correct levels, and we're going to compare the two cameras. Now, the reason why I went to 32,000 was that was the max for the A6400. The A7 III can get into the 51,200 or 52,000 ISO. So let's go ahead and hop over to the computer and take a look at this ISO test. So you can see the first image is the A6400 on the 85G Master. No picture profile was used. We're shooting f2.8 ISO 1250, 4K 24p 1/50th of a second. And now we just switched to the A7 III there, taking a look at the different images. Okay, right now we're at ISO 6400 on the 6400. And we're getting a little bit of noise up here in the sky. You're seeing a lot of noise, but you're getting a lot of detail in the lower end of the picture. Now on the A7 III, again, the crop angle is affecting the image, but we're both on the 85G Masters. we get some of the grain up in the sky, but not too much, and we'll get cropped in here. Now at 32,000, it's a huge amount of grain on the A6400 in the sky here. You can really see it starting to add up. You see it in the grass down here, a little bit in the water. And then when you jump over to the A7 III, it's a lot cleaner. You don't get near the grain up here in the sky. It's there, you definitely are seeing it, but you're not seeing it, you're seeing a wider image of it, and you're not getting as much detail brought in. I went to the 32,000 ISO. I wanted to bring the exposures back down and look at the images right there. So this is the 6400 ISO 32,000. And in order to achieve that, I had to go to an F7I to get that exposure set. So as you can see, we're getting some starring out of the lights, star pattern, but there's a lot of noise still in the dark of the image, as well as, let me back it up just a little bit here. You get a lot of noise in the grass and all around the image. Now, in a pinch, you could definitely use this. It would look fine, probably far away from a TV, but you definitely are seeing it. But moving on to the A7 III, this is again ISO 32000 F7I to bring it down into proper exposure at 0 here. And you can see the image looks overall, overall the image is much cleaner, and I would say it's more usable. I didn't do color balancing or do white balance checks on the cameras on this test, so that's a comparison portion I can't show you right now. But as far as this is just a simple noise check to see what kind of noise is in the image, and I think the noise is less noticeable in the full frame image. Obviously it should perform better being a full frame sensor with the same megapixels. You have larger pixels on the sensor, therefore more light gathering and a cleaner image. And the A7 III has been known to have excellent low light capability, and it shows it right here. This is ISO 32,000, and it's exceptionally clean for what it is. And you really got to get in on the image to see the noise on it. But if you're just, needed a nighttime scene and somebody's watching a video, they're not going to be able to see that kind of noise out of this image. This would be more than usable. So going back here to the A6400 at ISO 32,000, you can see a lot of this noise right here in this image. It's usable footage, but it's very grainy. And then if we jump up over here to the 6400 right here, past 6400, everything looks a little bit smoother. Now, of course, because we're not cropped in, we're not getting the detail in the grass and the trees as we did with the A6400. But again, it's a different image altogether because we are shooting it on a full frame sensor rather than the APS-C sensor. Okay, the next test we're going to be looking at is the color difference between the two cameras and the log footage out of the two cameras. And what we're going to do is hop over here to the computer. I'm going to hit play on this, let you watch it through. Here we have the A6400, no picture profile, ISO 200, white balance set to 5600. You can see on my face from the sun, there's a lot of blowout from the highlights, and the white it's overexposing on my skin there. And when we jump over to S-Log, we lose that. Flattered picture profile, and when I step up to the camera here, you can see I don't get that blowout on my face across my cheek as much, and that's one of the biggest differences in using S-Log and getting that flatter picture profile to retain more dynamic range in the cameras. Here we're going to go to the A7 III next here. So here's the A7 III, the same settings, no picture profile, ISO 200. You can see we have a wider image again because of that crop sensor, but we're still shooting the same everything on the 24G Master. And again, we get a little bit of blowout in the face. It looks a little bit better, but not much as far as the dynamic range with no picture profile. Now let's switch over to the S-Log 2 profile on the A7 III. This one is shooting ISO 800, but everything else is still the same. And you can see that, I did overcrank the shutter a little bit to accommodate the higher ISO. So you can see that when I come up to the camera here, we have a nice contrast image with the color grade, but again, the skin tone is much more evened out. without that blowout. So comparing both of those, the A7 III seemed to be a little bit more contrasty naturally with no picture profile. It also had, I would say, a little bit more vibrant color. Again, these are all things that can be adjusted in your picture profile, so I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis on which one may be better or not. So looking at that, there's a huge advantage to using S-Log2. As far as between the both cameras, it's negligible at best as far as which one may be better. They both look really, really good. What's the difference between these crop mode and the crop factors when you hear between full frame and APS-C? So one of the biggest differences you saw in some of the test footage here, when you're looking at the frame in a crop angle, the camera's on a tripod currently right here, and when you're watching this footage, I'm stepping in the same spots, coming up to the camera to the same distance from the lens. This is on the crop camera, so you get a little bit less picture on the side, so your sides most change just barely on the swing there. The A7 III footage now, we can see all three swings in the image, as well as much more of my backyard over here. Vertically, you're getting more image, and you can see a lot more area on a full frame. Now, it's the same 24mm perspective. The optics of the lens don't change. You still have a 24mm lens, whether it's on a full frame or an APS-C camera. Though it's different is the crop in. So essentially, when you're cropping in on the image, you're just zooming into the image, essentially, is all you're doing. That's what you're going to get, is that zoom in with the crop factor. Now, it's not zooming to a point of like degrading image quality or anything, because it's a natural recording. It's actually where it's recording at. Not one's better than the other. You have some more ability with full frame lenses as far as your depth of field, because you can show a narrower depth of field on a wider lens closer to your subject versus the crop. Now, likewise the other way, the crop lets you see closer in on a 4K image without seeing it all wide. So really, there's a benefit to both ways. Whether you go full frame or crop, you're gonna get the pros and you're gonna get the cons from both of them. This is the test shooting 120p low light. So as you can see here, this is a really clean image. ISO 640 is relatively low. You've got nice smooth flow of the flag shooting at 120. Come on. Okay, so right here we're looking at the A6400 cropped in. Definitely see some noise inside there. It's there, it's present, but on the full image, it's a very, very clean image. Now, hopping over to the A7 III next, you can see much wider image. We see the full flagpole, the top of the flagpole, and the banner of the flag. We have the street lamp that's in frame now. Color balance, I didn't balance this, so it's a little off as far as I did a simple white balance adjustments in post here, but the image looks good. Now, when we crop into this image, I feel like it's a little blurry, and I think it just made me misfocus a little bit. I've tried to go out and reshoot. They took the flag down. The flag hasn't been up, so I couldn't reshoot this, so we're going with this. Now, here in the full image, it looks great, but in that cropped image, it just looked a little bit blurry to me, and I couldn't iron out what the difference was. So here we are, 3-time crop in on the A6400 on the left, the A7 III on the right. You can see that it looks a little cleaner on the A7 III, but again, it's a little soft and it's hard to tell exactly because of that focus. So maybe I screwed it up, but that's what we've got. Now, when it comes to the daytime test, here we're going to look at the A7 III at 120 here first, and this is where I think the in-body stabilization works really, really well. When you're shooting slow motion handheld, there's no optical steady shot in the 85G Master, and this 85 right now is, it's very smooth when the movement, and I think that in-body stabilization is really helping it out. And when we watch the when you watch the A6400 footage here, you'll see that it's a little bit more jerky. And this is all real nice and smooth, fluid footage. You know, we're playing it back in 120 frames per second right now. These leaves and plants. Okay, now we're on the A6400. You see a lot more, a little bit of a float to the image, and I think that's where, like I said, the in-body stabilization really helps out. That floating, or that little bit of a jerk from my hand movement, because it's just handheld shooting, just holding the camera. It seems to be a little bit more amplified in the A6400. Now, two reasons for that. One, we're cropping in. We're at that 127.5 millimeter, and we're just going to see that crop in is just no different than zooming into an image. The farther you zoom away from something that's far away, your hand movements are amplified. Not only are they amplified, but I'm shooting on no steady shot at all. We're strictly relying on slowing the frame rate down to hide those movements. In this setup, when I'm panning the camera, there's a little bit of movement to my hands. It's going to be amplified on the A6400. Where on the A7 III, we're a little wider, so you're going to have less amplification of that movement, as well as the added benefit of the 5-axis in-body stabilization. And that's where I think this camera did a lot better job shooting the 120 B-roll type stuff. It looked a lot cleaner in that regard. The A7 III and the A6400 are both phenomenally good cameras. Don't be deterred. If you have an A6400, you've got a great camera. Mine's not going anywhere. I am not going to be upgrading at this time. The A7 III works really well for it. If you're looking at doing an upgrade, I would say it's a worthwhile upgrade for video. I don't, photo wise, I'm not even touching that subject right now. I don't shoot enough pictures to justify a test in that. There's without a doubt, this little A7 III blew me away in comparing it directly to my A6400, which I've been more than pleased with. I mean, this thing, low light, it killed it. The image quality is so good out of this thing with the 24G master on a gimbal. It looked fantastic. To answer my question, is it worth upgrading from the 6400 to the A7 III? Yes and no. No, because this camera is so capable, and both of these cameras are so closely spec'd and featured as far as everything about them. The only reason why I truly want to upgrade to this is if you find a limitation in this for what you're trying to do. If there's something you want to do that this camera can't do, as far as like your ability to use it, the form factor, or if you just really want that wider field of view of a full frame, and you're shooting, more depth of field stuff and more bokeh in your video, then the A7 III would become a relevant purchase at that point. That's my final thoughts on it. I don't know what else to say. If you have any other questions about these two cameras, hit me up in the comments below. So I know this video has been a long one, and if you're still here, wow, thanks for making it through to the end. Really helps me out. If you like this video, hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.